The night Chidi Bello won $500 million on live television, his ex-wife was watching from the sitting room of the house that used to be his. She had the television on because she always had the television on after dinner. She was not particularly paying attention. She was scrolling through her phone when the game show host's voice went up 3 octaves, and the studio audience erupted, and the camera cut to a man standing at a podium with his hands over his face, shoulders shaking. She looked up. She saw the number on the screen. She saw the name beside it. She put her phone down very slowly. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Whether you are in Lagos, Abuja, Accra, Nairobi, London, or anywhere across the world. Noble Stories is made for you. If this is your first time here, subscribe now. Every week we bring you stories like this one. Stories about the people life tried to break, and what happened when it could not. Chidi Bello was not a man who attracted attention. He was 41 years old, of medium height, with the quiet build of someone who had never been particularly interested in being noticed. He worked as a secondary school mathematics teacher in Enugu for 14 years. He drove a 2009 Toyota Corolla that had survived 3 minor accidents and carried the evidence of each one in small dents along its right side. He lived in a 3-bedroom house in the GRA that he had built across 7 years. Not all at once, the way rich men build things, but section by section, room by room, the way a patient man builds something he intends to keep. He had laid the foundation himself, not because he could not afford to hire someone, but because he wanted to know what it felt like to put his hands in the ground and say, "This is mine." His name was on the title document. His name, his fingerprint, his 14 years of saved teacher's salary and private lesson income, and the small inheritance his father had left him when he passed in 2017. Every naira that went into that house had a story behind it. He married Ngozi in 2015. She was 33 when they met. A pharmaceutical sales representative with a sharp mind and a sharper sense of what she wanted from life. She was beautiful in the specific way that makes people assume things will always go her way. She carried herself with the certainty of a woman who has decided early that she will never settle for less than she deserves. Chidi fell in love with that certainty. He mistook it for strength. In the early years, the marriage was good the way early years often are, before the pressures of real life begin applying themselves to the fault lines that every relationship contains. They had a daughter together, Adaeze, born in 2016. For a while, the 3 of them lived in the GRA house, and it felt like everything Chidi had been building toward had arrived. But things shift, quietly at first, then all at once. Ngozi had always been ambitious. That was not the problem. Ambition is not a flaw. The problem was that somewhere around 2019, her ambition began to require an audience that Chidi could not provide. She had been promoted twice at the pharmaceutical company. She had begun attending corporate networking events where the men wore suits that cost more than Chidi's monthly salary, and the women carried bags that cost more than his car. She came home from those events slightly different. Not dramatically, just slightly. The way a person changes when they begin spending time in rooms where their current life feels insufficient. She started making comparisons that she framed as observations. She said things like, "Tunde just bought his wife a new Camry." She said, "My colleagues are traveling to Dubai this December. When last did we go anywhere?" She said, "Once," with the specific casualness of someone who has rehearsed the sentence before delivering it. I sometimes wonder if this is really the life I want." Chidi heard her. He was not a man who missed things. He heard the dissatisfaction building in the background of their conversations, the way you hear weather changing, a change in pressure, a shift in the quality of light, something that is not broken yet, but is clearly moving in a direction. He tried. He increased his private lesson hours. He took on weekend tutoring sessions. He sat at his kitchen table in the evenings with a calculator, trying to find room in a teacher's salary for a life that was becoming too expensive for it. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. In March 2021, Ngozi sat across from him at the same kitchen table and told him she wanted a divorce. She was calm. She had clearly had the conversation in her head many times before she had it with him. She did not cry. She told him she deserved more. She told him she had outgrown the life they had built. She used words like potential and vision and alignment in sentences that felt like they had been borrowed from a self-help book. Chidi sat very still while she spoke. When she finished, he asked one question. He asked, "What about Adaeze?" Ngozi said they would work something out. The divorce proceedings took 11 months. 11 months of lawyers and documents and courtroom appearances, and the particular grinding bureaucratic exhaustion of a marriage being formally dissolved. Chidi hired a lawyer with the money he had been setting aside for Adaeze's school fees. Chidi hired a better one. The argument she made was simple and devastating. She had contributed to the household during the marriage. She had invested her salary in their joint expenses, in the upkeep of the house, in Adaeze's early education. The house, the GRA house that Chidi had built across 7 years before they married, had appreciated significantly in value during the marriage. Her contributions, her lawyer argued, had maintained and improved an asset that had grown in value in part because of her. Chidi's lawyer argued otherwise. The foundation had been laid before the marriage. The title was in Chidi's name alone. Every major structural payment had come from his savings and his inheritance. The judge considered both arguments. The judge ruled in Ngozi's favor. The house would be transferred to Ngozi. Primary custody of Adaeze would go to Ngozi. Chidi would pay monthly maintenance. He was given 30 days to vacate. He packed everything he owned into 6 boxes and the back seat of the dented Toyota Corolla. The day he carried the last box out, Ngozi was standing at the doorway. She did not say anything. She was on the phone with someone, laughing, the free and easy laugh of a woman who has just gotten exactly what she came for. She did not look at him as he walked to his car. He did not look back at the house. He drove to his younger brother Kine's one-room apartment in Enugu and slept on a mattress on the floor for the next 4 months. 41 years old. A teacher's salary. A mattress on a floor. Monthly maintenance payments that reduced his already thin salary to something barely functional. Visitation rights to his daughter every other weekend. 48 hours at a time, in Kine's one room, where he would sleep on the floor so Adaeze could have the mattress. He did not fall apart. That is the important thing to understand about Chidi Bello. He did not drink. He did not become bitter in any way that damaged him externally. He went to school every morning and he taught his students, and he graded their exercises, and he attended staff meetings, and he cashed his salary at the end of the month, and he paid his maintenance, and he saved what remained. He wrote mathematics problems in a notebook in the evenings. Not for his students, for himself. He had always found comfort in numbers, in the way a problem, no matter how complicated, had a solution that was either right or wrong, a certainty the rest of life refused to offer. His colleagues noticed He had become quieter. His closest friend at the school, a geography teacher named Obiora, took him for suya one Thursday evening and said simply, "You are allowed to be angry." Chidi ate his suya and thought about it. He said, "Anger takes energy. I need the energy for something else." Obiora asked what. Chidi said he was not sure yet. The show was called Fortune Final. It was one of Nigeria's highest-rated game shows, broadcast on a major network every Saturday evening, watched by an estimated 8 million viewers per episode. The format was simple. 12 contestants competed through 4 rounds of general knowledge and mathematical problem-solving. The last contestant standing won the grand prize, which had been building for 3 seasons without a winner reaching the final round. The accumulated prize for the 4th season had reached $500 million. Chidi had watched the show on Kene's small television on Saturday evenings with a quiet, focused attention. He did not watch it as entertainment. He watched it the way he read mathematics problems, studying the structure, noting the patterns, identifying where contestants lost their composure and why. He noticed that the eliminations in the middle rounds were rarely caused by lack of knowledge. They were caused by panic, by the particular brain freeze that arrives when the stakes feel too enormous for a person's nervous system to process calmly. He applied for the 4th season. The application process took 3 months. There were written tests, then an in-person elimination round in Abuja, then a final selection interview. Chidi took 3 days off school for the Abuja round. He drove the Toyota Corolla for 6 hours. He stayed at a budget hotel that cost 3,000 naira a night. He passed every round. He told nobody. Not Kene, not Obiora, not even Adaeze, who was 7 years old and would not have fully understood, but who would have told her mother, and Chidi was not ready for that information to travel anywhere near Ngozi's ears. He kept it the way he kept most things, quietly, internally, in the notebook beside his mathematics problems. The producers called him in October. He was in the staff room when his phone rang. He stepped outside into the corridor and stood near the window that overlooked the school's football field, where a group of his students were playing during break time. The producer told him he had been selected as one of the 12 contestants for Season 4 of Fortune Final. Broadcast date: the 2nd Saturday of November. Live. National television. He said thank you in the calm voice he used for everything, and ended the call. Then he stood at that corridor window for a long time, watching his students play football below, the November sun making everything look clean and uncomplicated. He went back into the staff room and graded the rest of his exercise books. He drove to Lagos alone. He did not tell anyone until the Thursday before the broadcast, when he sat Kene down in the one-room apartment and explained what was happening. Kene stared at him for several seconds. Then Kene said, "How long have you known?" Chidi told him. Kene said several things in rapid succession that cannot all be repeated here. Then he hugged his brother for a long time, without saying anything else. Obiora found out on the Friday when Chidi called him. Obiora also said several things that cannot all be repeated. Then he gathered 6 of the other teachers from the school, and they watched the broadcast together on Saturday evening at Obiora's house in a state of barely controlled collective anxiety that Chidi himself did not share. The studio was larger than it looked on television. Chidi had prepared the way he prepared everything, methodically, without drama. He had studied previous seasons. He had practiced timed problem-solving under pressure. He had slept 8 hours the night before. He had eaten a proper meal that morning. He wore a plain white agbada. Not because he was trying to make a statement, but because it was the cleanest thing he owned that felt appropriate. He sat in the green room before the broadcast with the 11 other contestants. Some of them talked, some of them paced. One man did breathing exercises in the corner. Chidi sat quietly and looked at his hands. He was not nervous. This surprised him slightly when he noticed it. He examined the absence of nerves the way he examined everything, curiously, without judgment. And what he found, when he looked honestly at what he was feeling, was this: he had already lost the most important thing that could be taken from him. The house was gone. His daughter slept in a room he would never enter again. He had lived on a floor. He had paid maintenance from a salary that left him with almost nothing. What exactly was he afraid of losing tonight? The 4 rounds took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Chidi did not win dramatically. He did not make impossible comebacks or deliver quotable one-liners. He simply answered each question with the calm precision of a mathematics teacher who has spent his entire professional life explaining that every problem, no matter how complicated, has an answer you can reach if you do not panic. He was the last person standing. The host, a well-known television personality whose excitability was legendary, grabbed Chidi's hand and raised it, and said his name into the camera 3 times. The studio audience was on its feet. The number appeared on the screen behind the podium. 500 million naira. Chidi stood at the podium with his hands over his face, not because he was performing emotion for the camera, but because the specific weight of that number, what it meant for Adayaz's education, what it meant for his future, what it meant for the 41 years of quiet, patient, unspectacular living that had brought him to this podium in a white agbada, arrived in his body all at once, and required a moment. He stood there with his hands over his face, while the studio erupted around him. He was thinking about his father. He was thinking about the foundation he had laid with his own hands. He was thinking about a kitchen table in Enugu, where a woman had told him she had outgrown their life. He stood there for 11 seconds. Then he lowered his hands and looked directly into the camera and said, in a voice that was completely steady, "God is faithful." In the GRA house, Ngozi put her phone down very slowly. She sat with the television for a long time after the broadcast ended. People who knew both of them would later describe the weeks that followed as a masterclass in the specific cruelty that life sometimes delivers with perfect timing. The morning after the broadcast, Chidi's phone had received over 400 messages before he had finished his first cup of tea. His name trended on Twitter. His school principal called to offer him a permanent head of department position. 3 financial institutions called to offer him services he had never previously qualified for. He bought a plot of land in a quiet part of Enugu. He hired an architect. He laid the foundation himself. Not because he could not afford to hire someone, but because some things a man needs to do with his own hands. He increased Adayeze's maintenance beyond what the court had ordered. He did this without being asked. He set up an education trust in her name that would fund her schooling from primary through university, regardless of what happened to him. He called Ngozi and told her about the trust. He did not do this to be magnanimous or to perform generosity. He did it because Adayeze was his daughter, and money was now something he had, and children should not be caught in the middle of what their parents became to each other. Ngozi said thank you in a voice that carried something complicated beneath the words. Chidi said you are welcome, and ended the call. He did not return to the house. Not to look at it, not to drive past it, not to speak about it with any bitterness that the people around him could record and repeat. When journalists asked him, as they inevitably did, about the divorce and the house and the circumstances of the preceding 2 years. He said the same thing every time, in different words but with the same essential content. Life has a way of settling accounts that we cannot fully predict or control. I spent 2 years learning what I was made of, when everything was taken from me. I would not trade that education for anything. Obiora, sitting at the suya spot where he had once told Chidi he was allowed to be angry, asked him one evening what it felt like. The money, the win, the reversal. Chidi thought about it for a longer time than you would expect. He said, "You know what the strangest thing is? The night I drove away from the house with 6 boxes in my car, I thought I had lost everything. But what I actually lost was everything that was not mine to keep. And everything that was mine, everything I had actually built inside myself, I carried that in the car with me." You cannot divorce a man from what he is made of. Obiora was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You should teach philosophy, not mathematics." Chidi laughed. It was the easy, unguarded laugh of a man who has nothing left to be afraid of. Adayeze was 7 years old when her father walked out of a house with 6 boxes. She was 8 when she watched him on television, standing at a podium with his hands over his face. She did not fully understand what 500 million naira meant, but she understood the specific way her father looked when he lowered his hands and spoke to the camera. She had seen that look before. She had seen it on Sunday mornings when he drove to pick her up for their weekend visits. The same expression every time, regardless of what the week had cost him. She told her mother, the morning after the broadcast, that she wanted to call her father. Ngozi handed her the phone without a word. Adayeze called Chidi and said, "Daddy, I saw you on TV." He said, "I know, my love." She said, "Were you crying?" He said, "A little." She said, "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Because sometimes good things happen, and they feel so heavy, you have to hold your face to keep it together." She thought about this. She said, "Okay." And then, with the particular simplicity of an 8-year-old who has said what she needed to say and is ready to move on, "Can you come and see me this weekend?" He said, "Yes." He always said yes. There is something that life does to people who stay intact through the worst of it. Not the people who perform resilience, who post about their struggles and use the language of overcoming as a form of personal marketing, but the people who simply continue, who go to work on Tuesday morning after the worst Monday of their lives, who pay their bills from what remains after everything is taken, who sit at a kitchen table with a calculator and try to find room for something better. What life does to those people, eventually, not always dramatically, not always on a television stage, but eventually, is return to them a version of what was taken that is larger than the original, not as reward, not as cosmic justice, but as the natural result of a person who never stopped building, even when there was nothing left to build on. Chidi Bello laid a foundation once with his own hands, because he wanted to know what it felt like to put something in the ground and call it his. He lost that foundation. And then he discovered that the foundation he had laid inside himself, in 14 years of teaching, in 7 years of patient building, in 2 years of sleeping on a floor and paying maintenance, and writing mathematics problems in a notebook in the evenings, that foundation had never been touchable. Nobody could divorce a man from that. Nobody could transfer it to their name. Nobody could take it away in a court judgment. It was always his. It had always been his. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that what is truly yours cannot be taken, share it right now with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Noble Stories if you have not already. Every single week we bring you stories exactly like this one. Stories about the people life tried to break, and what they became when it could not. Stories that remind you that the ground beneath your feet is never as gone as it looks. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. And tell us, have you ever lost something that turned out to be the beginning of something better? We will see you in the next one.